Ryan and Evan here from your Everyday Pro Investor team coming at you. Wrapping up the first full week of May. Since our last video on Monday, we've added a little bit to RTX, Raytheon Technologies. We've also gone and trimmed a little bit of our Microsoft. That position was getting rather large in our portfolio. We've got some nice gains there. So we took a little bit off the top. Definitely will add to that name again if it pulls back, but for right now, just doing some portfolio maintenance and making sure that we stay disciplined, and as positions grow, we trim a little bit. So since we last talked, Evan, Norwegian Cruise Line, they came out and there was a statement that they didn't know if they'd be able to continue to operate through the end of the year. There was, risk of basically them going out of business, going bankrupt. That was the headline that grabbed the day. I think it was Tuesday. And then it turns out that was just in a filing because they were filing with the SEC to do a debt offering. Now, I know you hold a position, I think it's through calls in this name. What were your thoughts when you heard that?
Yeah, initially, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. I think the stock traded down a little bit. Still held the calls. I averaged my cost way down, so it's not a huge risk at this point. And then I saw a few days later that it actually worked out to where they had quite a demand for the debt. And also with the cruise lines, I know some CEOs have already said, of the other names as well, have already talked about the demand for later in the summer, I believe in August. There actually is demand for cruise lines towards the end of the year, and they plan to reopen, I think it was August 1st. So I'm actually surprised. I mean, I didn't think that there would be that much demand for the cruise lines. I thought it would take maybe a year before people really get back into it. But that's definitely positive news if they were already seeing demand.
Absolutely. I'm surprised. I'm not a cruiser. I'm not big into it, but I know they have a cult following, and to see the demand coming back so quickly is a positive thing. I know that in the Everyday Pro Investor portfolio, we're holding some Carnival, really long-dated Carnival calls, kind of same strategy you took on Norwegian, where you just go way out. I think ours are in 2022 for the Everyday Pro Investor portfolio, and it's just a 10 call. I think we paid maybe $6 or so for those calls. Looking for the same thing you're looking for is eventually over time the demand comes back and these things move back up, mid-20s, mid-30s, maybe 40s. I don't know if they get back to their all-time highs before the options expire, but these could be potentially huge gainers. Talking about another area of that's been hit really hard by the coronavirus, the airlines. I think it was Thursday we found out United was trying to raise $2.5 billion in debt, and it turns out that there was no demand for it. They had to actually cancel the debt offering. I saw this as a huge red flag, not for the airline industry, but for United. United's gone bankrupt, I think, like 3 times, potentially, maybe 4. I can't remember exactly. But I think this is an airline-specific problem. Would you agree with that, Evan, or do you see this as a industry problem right now?
I really don't have thoughts about it. I was actually going to ask you. So it sounds like you're not concerned about the industry overall. It's more about just this specific name compared to the other airline industries. So if we had Delta, or we had Alaskan Airlines come out and do a debt offering, you don't think that those companies would have any problems trying to raise?
I don't think so. I mean, Delta did raise debt. They actually had one of the best balance sheets going into this thing. I like to fly Delta, period, but I also think they're a really well-run business. Alaska Air's got a great balance sheet. I don't think they've raised any debt yet. I could be wrong. I can't remember now. I'll have to double-check that. But Alaska Air is another one that's got a great balance sheet. I just think United, debt load's heavy. Management's not terrible, but definitely not best in class. And I think that there has already been debt raised in the airline space, and maybe the market's just saying they've got enough exposure, and United was a little late to the game.
Yeah, here's a question too. Do you think that all the airlines make it out of this, or do you think that there will be some mergers?
I think that eventually there will be mergers. Obviously, you've got the government bailout of sorts, however you want to look at it. They were able to raise debt in the public markets, and I think that short term you're going to be okay. If they took the government money, they've got to keep employees on until September, so they're going to be in operation through September. I do think, though, that you will see consolidation because there is smaller airlines and even some of the bigger ones that have heavy debt loads American Airlines is a huge concern of the big four, uh, in my opinion, because even their pension liabilities alone are astronomical, and then they have other debt loads on top of that. So I could see American disappearing in a way. I don't know if they go bankrupt and restructure and they still remain in operations but at smaller scale, or they go bankrupt and get acquired by somebody, and then I don't know who would acquire them at this point. That's the problem is coming out of this thing. None of these airlines are in great financial shape. So I don't know if that's one where they go bankrupt and the government steps in. I mean, there's definitely a real concern with the airlines having to be nationalized if demand doesn't return by early 2021.
Yeah, and what's interesting is now that everyone's proving that they can work virtually, it's just I'm curious if business travel is going to be the same going forward. Are you going to have to travel internationally to meet with clients, to meet with vendors, to meet with your own company, or can you handle things virtually like we're all doing throughout this period? So it's just kind of interesting to think about. And then also, how does that trickle down to the airline suppliers, manufacturers, Boeing, Airbus? There's really only those two. Does anything happen there, or is it already kind of a small circle?
I mean, I know that the airline manufacturer supply chains are feeling the pressure now. I think they're going to continue to feel the pressure, to be honest. I do think that you're right that demand will return. Don't get me wrong. Business travel makes up, honestly, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's at least 50% of travel, if not more, through the airlines. I think some of that's permanently lost. People will go back and they will go back to traveling for business. It's going to happen. What's the scale? I don't know. I think that you could potentially lose 20% of that business travel. So if that's, let's say, 50% of your revenue, you're losing a pretty big chunk by having 20% of business travel never come back. So we're learning to work in different ways, and I think you're right. This is a big thing that will change the airline space. It's going to change a lot of spaces. Obviously, the hotel space will be impacted.
Yeah.
It's just obviously a changing world. And I think one thing that, we need a vaccine, right, to make people feel comfortable. That's what everybody says. Well, we got this week that Moderna announced that the FDA had given them approval to start their phase 2 trial. This is a company we've talked about in the past. They've got really interesting technology, and the stock's just been soaring. I think it hit a new all-time high on Friday, maybe $59, something like that. And I think that winning the vaccine race isn't actually profitable for any company because they're going to have to give this vaccine away basically at cost for at least the first year or two. Yeah. But for Moderna, if they're able to win this race, it just validates their mRNA technology, which means that the 20 other drugs they have in phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials could see expedited approval, and it gives them real validation in the technology they're using. What they're doing hasn't been done before. It's never really been proven by any other company. There's not even that many that have waded into the area, but the technological advances we have allowed them to go down this path, and I think their platform is really, really interesting, and I think that if they get this vaccine, it'll help to validate that.
That's definitely what these companies in the running are after. It's more about validation, being the leader in the space, and having the world trust your products. And going forward, they're going to see, oh yeah, that was the company that nailed the COVID response. That's the drug company that I want to buy from going forward. So
Absolutely.
PayPal, just going to say I absolutely missed that one. PayPal's been ripping. I'll let you speak to that one.
Yeah, I mean, so we thought PayPal maybe was setting up for a pullback. I know you put a small position on. It wasn't anything big, but that's what you were looking for. Just kind of with the overall market theme of a pullback. And then I think it was last week I heard somebody actually come out and say, go buy the May 8th expiring 120 calls. I think PayPal was trading right at 120 when they said that. They said this thing's going to break out on earnings. It's testing a technical ceiling for the third time. Generally, the more you test the ceiling, the more likely you are to break through, right? So if you get there a third time and you don't start to pull back, which would create a triple tops of sorts, which isn't kind of a real technical pattern, but people talk about it. you're going to break through, and you're going to break through big because you're testing this ceiling for the second time. Especially theirs was over a pretty big period, and they reported earnings, a lot of positive notes coming out of it, and the stock shot up. Initially, it was like 10%. I think they ended up maybe up 15 total percent after earnings. The stock went from like 120 to 145 or 148, something like that. So those 120 calls are going for like $3, maybe a little more. If you would have bought them, we did not, wish we would have. Then those were worth 20 some dollars. I mean, they were just huge potential returns there. We saw similar activity in Twilio. Some unusual activity. It was one I thought Twilio would be hurt because their Uber, Lyft are two huge customers of theirs, and I thought that with people not taking ride sharing, they'd be hurt. So Twilio, I want to say it was the 120 strike too. Calls, people were in buying big. When they were buying them, they were paying only like $2 for it. Well, Twilio started the week at 106, and by the end of the week, it was up at $180. So you could have bought those calls for like $2, and potentially at one point they were worth as much as like $60. Obviously, that's huge gains. Those are the type of things. Those are the reasons you trade options if you are skeptical on something. And somebody obviously was like, all right, yeah, Twilio's about to break out, and somebody made a lot of money on that. Two other names, though, that we should probably talk about, we've been talking about a lot, are Wingstop and Shopify. I think it's just fair to say we've got both these names wrong.
Yeah, Wingstop reported well, and the reaction was pretty positive. I'm not too. I mean, our direction was selling the company for profit, so I still made what I was targeting in the name. Of course, if I could have held on to the positions and made some more money in the name, then yeah, that sounds great as well. But the fact of the matter is that the price is trading just way too. I mean, what is the multiple on that thing right now?
The PE is like 100 and something. They're gonna make $1 this year, which they're a growth company. Don't get me wrong; they're opening up tons of stores, and they're probably set up great for post-COVID world. I love the food. I think it's a great company, great business model, well run. It is a restaurant still, and what restaurant deserves to have a tech type of multiple where you're trading at 100 times earnings? It doesn't make sense to me. Still will buy the name on a pullback, but just, what did we get out of this thing 20 points ago, 25 points ago? We've been wrong for that. I'm not going to tell you to get into it now. I can't do that in good faith, but I would say on a pullback, absolutely. Shopify, we had kind of knocked for a while. I know last video we said, or maybe it was 2 videos ago, that, yeah, actually we were talking to small businesses. They're actually flocking to this name. Shopify was estimated to lose 19 cents this quarter. They actually turned a 19-cent profit, so really nice beat for them. I think the stock's up $800, something crazy like that. Still, this is a huge multiple on this company, but the things they're doing are really interesting. It's really geared towards small business, but they also have business customers as well. I like the name. I just can't get into it because of the valuation. It's really difficult to get in there.
It's funny too. I think I saw Tesla ended up having an okay week, right?
Yeah, I think they were up 10% or something on the week. They ended up.
That's incredible.
They recovered from that Musk comment, and they ended up having a really solid week this week.
It's interesting when your investors believe in the company more than the leader believes in the company.
Yeah, it's really weird. Everything that. Why would he say something like that? And then I don't know if you saw, but his pay structure was set up that basically the board, and I believe the shareholders approved it as well a while back, that if through this certain period of time, if the company's valuation averaged this amount, he would get these stock options, which were like $300 strikes or something like that. Well, it's almost like he was trying to drive the valuation down right before that expired so he wouldn't get paid is one thing that came to my mind, to be completely honest. It'd be crazy to think that. But by the company averaging this market cap, I don't have the specifics again, but he ended up getting a pay package equivalent to like $750 million. So the guy tacked on almost $1 billion in net worth in the blink of an eye.
Maybe he was just trying to protect himself. I don't know.
It could be. I mean,
I don't know.
It was a strange thing. That's all I can really say. I don't fully get it.
Worst jobs loss number in U.S. history at over 20 million. Unemployment spiked to over 14%. Yet the market did relatively okay last week.
Yep. Obviously, I think we tweeted about it. Everybody's tweeting about it, right? It's the easy get a like type of comment, but worst, job loss ever, unemployment spiking to just unbelievable levels. Um, but the market had already kind of discounted that, right? I mean, the market's forward looking. That's why we crashed 35, 37%, whatever it was. Now the market's rebounding on the economy is going to come back. It's not saying it's going to come back to where it was, because if that was the case, then we'd be trading right back near the highs. We're not there yet. But the market's looking forward, right? So if there's a hiccup in the recovery, then the market's going to sell off some. But the market's pricing in a pretty good recovery over the next, I don't know, I usually say the market looks forward 6 months. So the market's looking at the next 6 months and it's good. You go 6 months from now, you're talking election, obviously we're in the fall, could the virus be back? Are we shutting down again? What's going on, right? So there is real potential that September, October, sometime in there that we get a sell-off. And I think that that's why you need protection. But these numbers are unbelievable. One stat I saw too is people with a high school diploma or less, unemployment rate jumped to like 22% for that group, where if you have a bachelor's degree, 8% unemployment. So you can see that the educational impact is pretty substantial from an unemployment rate, which is unfortunate because generally those people with less education are getting paid less. They're the ones feeling the most pain from this, and it's really unfortunate. To be completely honest, it's sad that that's the way it is, and I hope that I really do see the communities in America kind of coming together and helping each other out. So hopefully that continues as we keep working through this tough time.
Yeah, and as a side note, there's always that argument about getting a college degree. Your point kind of does support that. Getting a college degree does count for something. It's just unfortunate that this is the example.
Yeah, and I'm not even honestly. I have pieces of paper. Education is good. I'm not going to say anybody shouldn't get educated, but you can rack up so much debt that it actually sets you behind. And I think the cost of education is a huge problem right now. And I'm wondering if this thing could potentially send some of those places under, to be honest, because I think that people are going to look at education differently, funding will be differently. I actually think education is going to get hit pretty hard from this at the higher levels, and I think it's a good thing. It's time for reform in that space. I could go on for a long time, I won't, but
you're right.
Not a positive
You're right though, because my little sister she just got accepted to a top university or a big university in Michigan, and she was all excited to get into it, to go to it this fall, and now that's like on the back burner. She's highly considering staying home another year and just going to school online before, seeing how this plays out before deciding to make the commitment to go on campus to a university like that.
Yeah, and I think you're going to continue to see that. I think that's going to be a common trend for at least the short term, and hopefully it changes things for the long term because these schools are just taking way too much money from people, to be
Agree
honest.
with
that. Moving on, though, Disney, name in our portfolio, name we've been holding, we were buying on the way down. Clearly, theme parks are like 50% of their revenue or something crazy. They're getting crushed right now. But positive news, Shanghai is going to be opening up Monday, but at 30% capacity. That's kind of their safety measures and protocols. They are sold out. They sold out really fast. What does that tell you about what could happen here in the U.S., Evan?
I think it's a good indicator, right? That's definitely a positive thing to understand that when these places do reopen, people aren't scared to go and spend money and consume and buy products and experiences like the Disney park. So I would say it's positive, right?
I think so. I think that, and I think the U.S. is, what's the right way to put this? I don't want to say we're dumb because that's not the case, but we're very strong-headed. We're very resilient. And we've done a good job of keeping people relatively funded through this, and people's spirits haven't been completely crushed yet. So if we get some of these things back open, I do think there will be demand.
Yeah, absolutely. I get your point.
So we cover. Oh, go ahead.
If other parks are seeing a good response, then the U.S. parks will definitely see a good response. That's basically the point.
Yeah, and I think that they could even open as soon as probably June 1st here in the U.S. if things go well, especially in Florida with the way that state's going. Seems to be in a positive trend. But, that was last week. What are you looking for this week?
Well, based on, so we spoke a little bit before this call, but the market, based on how it traded last week, it's actually setting up for a potential breakout based on how it closed. Closing at new post crash highs and coming off of like a 2-week trading range. Now, we always talked about the pullback, and we did get a few. They were just never as healthy as we wanted, but I know that we cleaned up on the hedges that we had. I think the very last ones that we had actually, we ended up, well, they expired this Monday, but with the market being up, we're gonna lose all the money there. But I think you could try and play this breakout. I don't know if you play it with protection at the same time. I don't know. We haven't gotten that far yet, but I just know it's looking like it could potentially break out.
Yeah, I think that, 2,900 level on the S&P. We got above it. We pulled back from it. We actually talked about it. We said, yeah, that was a signal for us when it got above that, and then failed to confirm it. Well, this time it got above it, and then we rallied into the close on Friday. I think we closed at 2920-ish on the S&P. The Qs are actually positive for the year, so the NASDAQ 100, which is obviously pretty tech heavy, but I think that you've tested again, you got through again. Do you confirm next week? I think you do. I think you get a short, because it's not you're retesting that level relatively quickly. It's only been a week or two. I don't think you're going to get a huge breakout. I think we went from like 291 on the SPY to 279, I want to say. So you got like a 12-point range there. So I could see this breakout being a 12-point range. We get up to probably some resistance right around 300. And I think that that's the short-term move. I don't think you're going to get enough negative news in the short term to derail this thing. And it looked like we had positive momentum going into Friday. So as negative as we have been on the market, I think that you've got some short-term positives. I still think long-term you're going to get a 10% pullback at some point. Now I don't know what levels that's going to be from. I don't know why that's going to be. I still think you're going to get another buying opportunity, though. I am going to look for some short-term trades here. I've got some calls sold against some positions, and if they get up into that level, honestly, I'm going to let them get called away at this point and look to add on a pullback back to those names that I like at this point.
Yeah, for me, I just have to roll out we trade the SPXL. I have to just roll out a call that gets called away this coming Friday. If I don't roll it, it'll get called away. So I want to hang on to that one. I'll roll that out to a further date and a higher strike. And that's about it for me. Besides trying to play the market breakout, I'll put some type of trade on. I just don't know what it will be yet.
Yeah, honestly, I don't have a good trade yet either. I don't know if it's just go buy the SPY and let it fly, or buy the Qs and see what happens, or buy a Microsoft call short dated and watch it potentially break out, because Microsoft's at almost like 185, 184, I think is where it's at. 190-ish was its all-time high, and Microsoft reported a great number, and it's going to continue to succeed in this environment. Great company. I could see it going back to the all-time highs, if not making new highs. So that's one I'm kind of keeping an eye on. I know I trimmed it, but I could see a short-term pop, so that's where I would go and buy calls. And then after I would make profits on those, wait for the pullback, and then add to the position again. We're still holding a pretty good position in there. So, anything else you want to add?
That wraps it up for me.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Go down, click that like button, subscribe to us. We do put out a video every week, sometimes twice a week. If you don't already, go on Twitter, follow us. Link will be below. We're also on Instagram. Go check us out there. And if you haven't, go to our website, everydayproinvestor.com. Check out what we do. And if you like our stuff, then go ahead and subscribe to our investor service. And let's have a good week.